The Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog. Valero Texas Open, early picks, course preview, the research that you need to know. We're going to dig into everything using fantasynational.com. Fantasynational.com/Mayo to get yourself 20% off. If you do the weekly on Wednesday, then you get a 2-for-1. You get Valero to build your lineups and do any extra research that you want, and then it will carry you through the next Wednesday, which means you'll get all the stats and info to build all of your Masters lineups as well. And we're kicking off Masters Week early this week. It's going to be player-by-player preview starting Thursday, and I believe that we're going to have coverage every single day throughout the end of the Masters. So if you want Masters coverage, you've come to the right place. So sub to Mayo Media Network as well. And you want to turn those notifications on because I'm doing a $5,000 trip giveaway. It should be announced on Monday. In case everything's not in plan, it'll be sometime during the week for the shows where we are giving away a trip for two to the Pat Mayo Experience live in Toronto. That includes airfare, hotels, 2 days at the Canadian Open, tickets to the Pat Mayo Experience live, and 2 Blue Jays tickets on the Thursday before and the night of the first round of the Canadian Open as well. So if you want the real PME Golf Blue Jays experience in Toronto with us, then you're going to want to stay tuned to the Pat Mayo Experience. So you smash the like and give me your winner for the final time you can qualify for the Masters for the Valero Texas Open down in the comment section or on Spotify or on Apple right now, because there might be extra giveaways if you start doing that stuff as well. This is the final opportunity for anyone to qualify for the Masters, and the only thing that needs to happen for you is you don't need to previously have been qualified for the Masters, and you need to win the Valero Texas Open. We've seen this happen a bunch over the past few years. Most notably, Akshay gets in over Denny in the playoff a year ago, which was one of the most heartbreaking and then thrilling endings to a tournament I've had in so long, having outright money on Akshay. He enters Sunday with a 4-stroke lead. Denny goes on the heater of all heaters to force that playoffs. Then he duffs his chip into the water. After Akshay has to make this huge putt on the 72nd hole, then hurts his rib celebrating, hurts his shoulder celebrating, and needs physiotherapy walking down the fairway in the playoff. Fortunately, it was all okay. He makes birdie on that par 5 on number 18. That's the hole that they play in the playoff, the par 5. Once again, this is a fun course, and what you really need this week in terms of overall skill set, you just need to be very solid tee to green, mainly through your ball striking. We've seen Corey Connors win here twice. We've seen JJ Spawn win. Akshay, another one. A lot of the things that those guys have in common, they're not necessarily the biggest bombers in the world. They're all like slightly plus distance, very accurate off the fairway. So they gain a lot of their strokes through strokes gained off the tee. Approach is going to be worth around 2 times what off the tee is, but that's not a huge gap considering you see some tournaments where it's 3x or 3.5x on approach. You want to be hitting as many greens in regulation at Valero as possible. I would caution waiting to do anything betting wise until you really get a good sense of what the weather is looking like. Right now, we're still a bit too far off to figure that out, but this one will always trigger PTSD in a lot of people. This was the one tournament where I believe it was Carlos Ortiz and Dustin Johnson, both now on LIV, strangely enough, that ended up in the bad wave, who ended up with the top 10. But there was one wave. It was the early morning on Thursday. I think it was 2014, 2015, somewhere along there. It was like a 4-shot difference between the morning and the afternoon wave, just because the winds were so high and they made them play it through it. So just keep that in mind, that this is a course where wind can make a substantial impact on what's going on with the field. And the field is really good for this tournament. A lot of guys are getting in some warm-up. It's been good we've seen this happen over the course of the past few years. It's actually helped the Canadian Open a lot as well, more so than you'd think. A lot of American players don't end up playing it, but a lot of the high-end Euros do, now it being the week before the US Open, to get one more glimmer of practice in, try to get that form if you've lost it just a little bit. And that's what we're seeing with Valero. Right now, you got Ludwig, Hideki, Tommy, Keegan, Cantlay, Mav McNeely. Akshay's back to defend his title this year. Connors, who's the 2-time winner. Tom Kim, who's gaining a ton on approach right now. Finau, Burns, Denny, Jordan Spieth, they're all in this field. Then you have players like Siwoo, for example, who need to win this week in order to get themselves into the Masters. I'm doing a Underdog majors only draft a little bit later in the show, and you'll see Siwoo still going super high in those drafts. He's currently outside the top 50 in the world. He's not actually qualified for any majors, so he's not necessarily the greatest pick at this point in time. And I'll update my sheet. You can find it down in the description right now of the players who are playing in which majors. I'll update that after the conclusion of Houston because there's a couple guys on the bubble at the moment that if they end up top 50 in the world rankings, they will automatically qualify for the Masters. Michael Kim, our guy, being most notable above those. He needs a top 50 finish. And he has made the weekend. He has made the cut in Houston. So if he can keep himself up inside the top 50, it should be good enough to push him in to the Masters, which would be awesome. He's currently in the field for Valero, but I believe this is the 8th straight week that he's played in Houston. So I would expect him to WD from Valero if he does end up with his Masters invitation. If he does WD from Valero, I believe he will be joining me for the Masters coverage as we go into it. So give first impressions about his season, about the course, and what has changed so much about his game. So hopefully he can get himself into Augusta, both for him and for us as the viewers, that he might join the show this week to talk a little bit about his season and what we're actually trying to do in terms of prep for Masters season. So that's the field. Those are the key stats. What I want to get into now is the course at TPC San Antonio. It's 7,438 yards. It's a par 72. Poa Travalis overseed, the same as the past 2 weeks because we're still at the part of the season where the Bermuda has not quite grown in yet. 6,400 square foot average green size, which is on, it's a slightly smaller than average. And you'll see the green and regulation rate at this course is one of the lowest on tour. It's only 58%. 64 bunkers around the course, only 3 holes with water in play. And the fairways themselves are actually pretty tiny. So you can keep that in mind when you're going through it as well. It's a Greg Norman designed course in consultation with Sergio Garcia. It's played host to this event every year since 2010. Last year was actually the first year ever there has been a playoff at TPC San Antonio. So it took 14 years, but they finally got one in. And since 2010, the front nine has played significantly more difficult than the back. From 2010 to 2018, the field played the front nine at a combined 3,704 over par, juxtaposed to just plus 730 over par for the back nine. In that same span, this event had more triple bogeys or worse than all other courses except Sawgrass and PGA National, which is really it's really saying a lot considering TPC San Antonio only has 3 water hazards across it that you can make some big numbers. This is the spot where Kevin Na hit it into the woods and made a 16. Then he came back the next year with a chainsaw and cut down the trees. Pretty funny stuff. Also, another guy who's on live. TPC San Antonio, as mentioned, has some of the toughest greens to hit in regulation, along with Riviera, Harbortown, and Southwind. They're all a part of that mix. And I already mentioned the strokes gained approach as being the most influential stat at any course, but it's a little bit less so. And we jump over to Fantasy National, we'll see that a little bit. And the weather swing is really the thing that you need to worry about. If you want to find the weather, the wind tower that I'm using this week is on windfinder.com. It's the San Antonio International Airport. That is the closest wind tower to the course that will give us the forecast if you want to get some early research in on the course. The cut line has not been under par any year that this has been played at TPC San Antonio. In that 2015, that was the year. 2015 was the big year in terms of the weather splits. It was +7 that year, but it's been +2 and +1 each of the past 2 years. That both has to do with the course not being I'm talking like it's the most challenging course on tour. It's not. It's a little bit long. It's a par 72. There's a lot of easy holes out here. For example, the par for 17th is drivable to a lot of the field. Now, it's protected on the left by bunkers and the short right on bunkers. There's not a lot of eagles made on the hole. It's only a 0.7% eagle rate, but it's the second easiest hole on the course. It has a 31% birdie rate, and you can drive it and make eagle. It's just very, very difficult. You need to be able to fly those bunkers. I remember betting on Trey Mullinax here the year that Andrew Landry won. I was just in such glee. I thought he was going to win. He went for it on 17, pulled it left, and then chunked his chip into the bunker in front of him, and that was the end of poor Trey Mullinax. Having a pretty good week at Houston, though, so keep old Trey Mullinax on the back burner here. I always thought that driving distance would make more sense here than anything else. However, when we start taking a look at some of the players, they're not the longest, and I think that had more to do than anything with, historically, this tournament just wasn't catering to a strong field. And now that it does, that when you thought about long shots and back-end players in a weaker field, the Bombers did have more of an advantage. However, now that you get more of, not necessarily the longest hitters, but just a higher quality of player, that we're seeing not short players by any means, although Brendan Todd was in third place going into this tournament last year, like Denny, for example. Like, Denny's not a bomber. Corey Connors isn't a bomber. Akshay's not a bomber, but they're all like plus distance, just they're not Rory, who is not playing in the field this year. Rory did come third a year ago at this tournament too, but I was thinking that for long shots, that's probably the route you want to take unless they just have very good overall total driving. There's 64 bunkers across the fours. 3 of the 4 par 3s are at least 207 yards. So plus distance does help in that category, that some players don't have to hit 4 irons off the tee. Some of the longer hitters can hit 6 irons off the tee, depending on what the wind is doing. That's just an easier shot to make on some of these more difficult par 3s. And there are monstrous par 5s. 3 of the 4 par 5s are 591 yards or longer. It takes eagle chances at a play for a lot of the field. You're going to see a lot of wedge play here because of that. Even on number 18, like, you can go for it. You can get there in 2. We've seen that happen, but a lot of times if you don't hit the perfect tee shot, you got to lay up to 100 yards and you got to be able to spin your wedges to the right place. Now, number 14 is the easiest hole on the course. That's a par 5. It generates more eagles than the other 3 par 5s combined. You got to make good scores on that hole. It does possess a 7% bogey rate, so it's not like the end of the world. It's not a guaranteed birdie, but they make it 42% of the time, eagle 2% of the time, just to kind of keep that in mind as we go through it. Let's jump over to Fantasy National and take a look at the course preview. I have the scorecard up on the screen right now. And as I mentioned, you can see the 2.1% eagle rate for number 14. It gets very difficult on the front. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the 9 holes on the front play over par, but they're very generous birdie opportunities. That's why you see guys that just hit a lot of greens in regulation do very well here, because they're just going to 2-putt for par most of the time, and then they're going to try to pick up their strokes on the 6 really easy holes. You got number 2, it's a par 5. Number 5 is a par 4. It's short though, only 400 yards, a 22% birdie rate. Only a 22% birdie rate at number 8, which is also a par 5. It has a 15% bogey rate. You don't see very many par 5s that do that. So players from that like mid-range, like good long, like short wedge and longer wedge range can really excel even with bad tee drives here. But if you can get yourself into the proper position, that's all Akshay did. I didn't think that Akshay would have actually been a very good choice last year until I really started to think about it in terms of how you win at this course. Now, I think Akshay is an ascendant player. However, he's just not that good around the greens. We can take a look at Akshay here and just try to jump into him for a second. And I love where he's going right now. You can see he rates 16th in the model that I built out. More on that in a second. You can always hit the time codes for all of that. But he's been better around the greens, and he does have top 10s in 3 of his past 4 starts coming in. But historically, like a very bad around the green player. He can lose a ton. So when we take a look at Valero last year, you see he gained 6.3 strokes around the green. That was very helpful. His tee to green was just outrageous. He and Denny went to a playoff at 20 under. Rory came in third. He was 11 under. They were both 9 strokes better than anyone else in the field. So that's a bit of an outlier from that sense, but just generally he's not very good around the greens. But when you hit so many greens in regulation like he did a year ago, that takes a lot of the short game out of play. That was sort of my case for him a year ago. I remember me and Vincenzi were talking about it on the Best Bet show that we ran the week before, that you're not playing, when you're betting an outright winner, you're not playing for a 7th place finish or a 20th place finish. How do you get Akshay to the top? Well, he doesn't actually have to chip all that often because his green and regulation rate is so much higher than everyone else's during that week. That is his path, and that is exactly what he did. That's how Corey Connors has done so well here over the years too. That his approach play, his driving has been so good. He simply hits more greens in regulation than the vast majority of the field, thus alleviating a lot of the problems with his short game. So he doesn't need to be electric with his short game. He has to make his putts, which he has done very well at this course over time. And then you just don't have to worry about the chipping as much. But take a look at this average shot distribution. It's very flat across the board. So it's 19%, 200 plus, 18%, 75 to 200, 175 to 200, 20%, 150 to 175, 15%, 13%. You see huge chasms a lot of the time between, especially on longer courses, where you get these giant approaches. And because so many players have to lay up on the par fives, it really brings more of the wedge play into range. Even 75 to 100, you get 6% of your shots on approaches coming from that range, which kind of coincides with where do you want to lay up to on some of these holes? What's the proper range? So if guys can lay up to their proper number, they can take aim at a lot of these holes. But most of the scoring comes from this 150 to 175 range. We take a look into the deeper stats from last year. That was the key range that really popped up for a lot of guys at the top of the leaderboard. Driving accuracy, much lower, 55% than your tour average. Greens and regulation, 58%, much lower than your tour average, which is now 66%. Scrambling a little bit easier here. 3 putts a little bit lower than average. And then you can still get some wild, like the average distribution in scores, the 4 big ones, 73. So 1 over, even, 1 under, 2 under is where your vast majority of rounds are going to come from. But you see guys go low here. You have 864s on it, 463s, 1965s, and then you just get your outlier years where guys just kind of go crazy. There's been 82s, 81s. If you're not able to control your driver off the tee, you're going to hit it out of bounds, and then you got a real bad time going. Driving distance is a little bit longer here than your average tour event. A lot of that has to do with, there's usually a drought, and it's very dry in San Antonio, so the balls roll out a little bit more, and there's just not that much water in play off the tee, so it's not really putting in a lot of short drives. Like when we see at PGA National, the driving distance is a lot shorter than you would expect, same as Bay Hill, but a lot of that has to do with guys hitting it into the water, so their average drive is just going to be so much shorter because they're forced to drop 100 yards behind where they would have hit it to begin with. And, average green regulation proximity is pretty even as it is. I do want to take a look back at last year's tournament before we jump into too much. I'm going to do the best ball draft. I'm going to dig into the stat modeling. That's the order that we're going to go in this week. So we take a look at the tournament history. And you'll see last year it's Akshay Denny in the playoff. The year before that, Corey Connors wins over Sam Stevens. Kuchar, Sam Ryder was up there. Ryder playing some pretty decent golf at the moment. I really liked him at Valspar, and I believe he ended up inside the top 15, top 13. He kind of gave it away a little bit after a hot start on Sunday. And even to take a look at what he's up to at the Houston Texas Open right now. Where are we at? Sam Ryder. I'm using the Fantasy National app to look this up quickly. He's currently T36 as at the beginning of the third round as I'm recording this. Sam Stevens actually made the cut as well, but it's pretty good for Sam Ryder. I mean, I can click on his name to see how he ended up doing. He ended up T14 at Valspar. He was T16 at Valspar, T14 at the Players. Very good ball striking, and the putting has been electric basically since the American Express. Only once has he dropped below 2.7 strokes gained, and he's made the cut in every single one of those events. So we take a look at the Valero over the years. He was third place, miscut. So it was really 2 years ago. He gained 7.5 strokes on approach and mimicked that on the greens with 7.5. And he's sort of trending to be around there at that point now. The approach play and the putting continues to be really good. So keep that in mind. Ludwig's in the field. He was T14 a year ago. He's actually played this twice. Missed the cut the first time. It's difficult when you start to think about some of the players at the very top end who I mentioned, whether it be, Hideki played in this last year. What was Hideki? Hideki was T7 a year ago. He tends to play it almost every year. He was T15 the year before that. But this is more of an equalizer tournament. Like Tommy was T7 last year in his debut at the tournament. It just, for whatever reason, this tournament has given way to either first-time winners or players that you would think about in that second tier, like the Corey Connors of the world, like Minwoo. I don't think this would be a great Minwoo course because he doesn't hit his approaches all that well. That's why I liked him in Houston so much more, that you can get away with bad approach play in Houston if your short game is good or your driving is impeccably good. But that's just something I wanted to throw out. That was from last year. Corey Connors wins the year before that. It was... Who won in 2022? Now I absolutely cannot remember who won that year. It's probably someone who went to live if they are no longer in the system. No, it was JJ Spawn. Interesting. Yeah, JJ Spawn beats Matt Kuchar. I assume JJ Spawn is going to end up in this field, although he's got himself into the Masters. This is a tournament where he got his only career win. You can see there's not a lot of big names played that year, and you just have random dudes. Like Kuchar played this tournament incredibly well over the years. There's Matt Jones. He's on live. CH3, he's on live. Troy Merritt's on the Euro Tour trying to win the Indian Hero Open right now. I just had no idea what had happened to him, but that's where he is. He's over there. Keegs has played this well. Keegs is in the field field this week, so that's worth keeping in mind. 2021 was Spieth. I remember I had Tringali that year. I think Tringali came in 4th behind everyone. He was the 36-hole leader. Matt Wallace as well. Wallace and Hoffman are two really interesting plays, and Woodland's having a really good go in Houston right now. So maybe even going back to this year is something that we can do a little bit more of. Let's see. Take a look at the leaderboard from that year and switch over to, we'll go select year 2021 and change over to the strokes gained leaderboard to see how the guys got it done that year. It was very much like how Sam Ryder ended up at the top of the leaderboard 2 years ago. Spieth was 7.4 on approach. He was 5.7. No, geez, Tringali really fell down the board here. What the hell happened to Tringali? It was 9th that year. Must have had a really bad Sunday. But Wallace played really well. I believe that was the tournament where he came off winning in Puerto Rico a few weeks before. But another name to keep an eye on is he's been playing a little bit better golf recently, I thought. He was 26 at Puerto Rico. I think he made the cut in Houston. Maybe he's not playing as well as I thought. Most of it's to do with his putter, which has just been god-awful since the season turned into 2025. But the tee to green hasn't been abysmal. Chuck Hoffman's won this tournament before. He's like Mr. Texas. He made the cut in Houston, and the approach play continues to be really good. Off the tee continues to be really good. And we take a look at his Valero track record over the years. It is very, very good. So not so much the past. Well, I guess he was T22 in 2023, 69th a year ago. Couldn't really find out his putting stroke there, but years previous to that, second, first, 11th, 3rd, 13th, second, 13th for Chuck Hoffman. And this is about as good a form as he's been in 4 years. I know he's blown it for us at the Amex playing in the final group, but sometimes when guys are 150-1, they're not going to win tournaments. But if you can just get enough of them in there, then maybe we can do it. Hoagie was T12 the last time he played as well, and he is in the tournament coming off gaining almost 10 strokes on approach at the Players. This does seem like a really good Hoagie course if he can keep his driver under wraps. That's been the undoing of Tom Hoagie versus this time now versus this time last year when he was able to not necessarily dial in the driver, but you can see it was good at the Players. He ended up coming in third. He'd been making cuts anyway, but just losing a significant amount of strokes off the tee. Ditto earlier on in the season and during the swing season, but when we caught him during his heater last year, he was just gaining marginally to a lot off the tee and just lighting it up with approach play. So we need him. We've seen him turn around his driver a little bit at the Players. It was the most he had gained in any start this year. 9.9 strokes on approach, and the putter has come along. Like Akshay, not very good around the greens. However, again, it's the same sort of theory that if Hoagie's ever going to win a tournament, he's just not going to miss that many greens because his approach play is so good. So it mitigates the damage he can do to himself, although even with like 3 chips, he can lose 4.3 strokes around the green, which would not be very good. So that's Chuck Hoffman. We'll see how Gary is doing. I feel like Gary's been off and on, having a decent week after a very solid second round at the Houston Open. But, the chipping has been bad, the putting has been bad, and we haven't seen very high-end approach play. We've seen good approach play, with Phoenix being the best of the bunch, but only has one finish inside the top 20 so far this year. So that's interesting to look at as well. So that's at the course breakdown right now. I'll dig more into the stats in the field. But before that, we're going to do a real-time draft on Underdog. Code Mayo at Underdog to get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $1,000, and I'll see you on the other side. Outdoor golf season is almost here, but is your swing ready? With 126 X-Golf locations across 38 states, it's never been easier to dial in your swing year-round. I can speak to this. Going to the simulators all winter long, especially the good ones. You can go to crappy simulators. You don't want to go there. You want to go to X-Golf and really prep your game and hit the season firing. X-Golf's state-of-the-art simulators let you play full rounds, tee to green with unmatched short game realism. X-Golf's auto tee system ensures you're always ready to bomb a drive. No delays or automatic two-putts, just real, competitive golf in a lively sports bar environment. Love a little competition? X-Golf's handicap leagues and tournaments give every golfer a shot at winning incredible prizes. Upcoming spring tournaments include the Majors, where you could win a beach or mountain vacation, or the Cinco de Mayo Scramble, win a trip to New Belgium Brewery in Asheville, and that is just the start. So visit playxgolf.com to find your nearest X-Golf and book your tee time today. Again, trust me on this. You're going to want to go to X-Golf. So visit playxgolf.com. So we're going to jump over and do an underdog draft. This one's going to be for the $50 Big Albatross. There is only a 10 max entry for this, $40,000 to first. I've been running through some small Albatross ones, which is only $10 per entry, but the rules are slightly different for each of them. I went over that in the strategy video I did for the majors only. There's also a scramble returns contest that also starts at the Masters, but that is for every single tournament the rest of the season. So I'll cover that one next week as we head into the Masters, but I want to stick to the majors one because I think these ones are a ton of fun if you want to get into them. So when we take a click on the Big Albatross, the one thing you're going to see versus the Little Albatross is just the advancement rate. You can have, it's 4 pods. So you draft against 6 people, you win your pod of 6, you move on to the US Open, where once again you have to win a pod of 6, ditto or you move on to the PGA Championship. Then you move on to the US Open where you have to win a pot of 5, then you get to a 25-seat final for this contest because it's only 4,500 people. Overall, there's just not that many people in it right now. It's only 16% full. Now, as I am recording this, the Houston Open has yet to finish, so we don't exactly know who is going to be in the Masters as of right now. For example, if Michael Kim comes inside the top 50 in Houston, he has made the cut, he's going to earn himself an invitation to Augusta. Therefore, it makes him a more attractive pick, knowing he's inside the top 50 in the world too, because that could get him into some of the other tournaments along the way, because he is number 2 in the Aon top 10, so he's probably in every signature event for the rest of the season. Now, in the description, you can find my link to my newsletter, the Mayo Media newsletter, which I will update after the Houston Open and update some players who are in majors. But I have the players who are in all 4 majors, 3 majors, however that goes down the list, and if more people qualify, I'm going to update the list. And you do want volume for this. So if you can have all 10 players playing in the Masters, that's great. That means you have 10 shots in order to advance to the next one. But you do want to make sure that you have as many bullets as possible in these drafts. So we'll jump on over to, you can find the, if you're just looking for rankings too, if you go underneath the rankings tab on Underdog, you can find all of the sports, all of the different drafts. And this is the PGA major season, and it'll just give you the ADP as we go through. So we're locked in right now. I got the second pick in this draft for $50. You can only have up to 10 entries, and I've already put out in a queue of the 3 players that I like towards the back end. I really like Sergio, I really like Dietrich, and I really like Højgaard. Now, they're only qualified for 2 of the 4 majors at the moment. However, it's the first 2, so I know I'm going to be at least able to get them. If I get through the Masters, I'll at least have more bullets. And if these guys play well, which I need them to do, then all of a sudden I'll hope that they qualify for the other ones. I'm going to take Rory with the 2nd overall pick. Scotty Scheffler went 1st overall. That's no surprise. These should be the first 2 picks. I think after the first 2 picks, and listen, you can say, hey, Rory's never going to win at Augusta. You might be right. He might never do that, but there's no player coming in so far in 2025 with better form. That's usually the main predictor for the Masters. High-end player that's in great form coming in, either wins or top 10s. Rory has 2 wins already. He has a top 5 over in Dubai to kick off his season. He just hasn't played all that much, but it's been very good once he's been on. Now, Morikawa goes 3rd, and this is where it gets really jumbly, and you can differentiate your teams a little bit. I prefer to do that towards the end of the draft, as there are certain players that I really do like. Like, for example, if Siwoo can find his way in, he would probably, I think he needs to win Valero in order to get himself into the Masters. So he's probably a terrible pick. But if you think that Siwoo can get it together and you have 9 players throughout the course of the season that are in the Masters, and Siwoo can play himself into the other ones, he's qualified for 0 majors somehow at this point. It's just an example of maybe a name that's going. Let's see where Siwoo is going. Siwoo is going at ADP 44, and he's not currently qualified for any major championship. So he's a terrible pick right now, and he might end up on a lot of teams, especially if they're auto-drafting. So as we see right now, I would actually take, so Morikawa goes 3rd, Bryson goes 4th, my guy Nez, and then Benny Betts ends up going with Xander, and at the turn, the 6-1 and 2-1 goes Ludwig, then John Rahm, then Brooks, because we have all of the live players back in. So again, we're just drafting guys at this point in time that are in all 4 of the majors. Now, I don't think that Morikawa is necessarily a bad pick. I probably take Xander with the 3rd pick, just especially after leading the Valspar in strokes gained approach. And, playing pretty well on TGL after that during the finals, although his team could not beat the force that is the Atlanta Drive. I just think he ends up being a better pick in terms of pure win equity at the top, considering he won 2 majors a year ago. Ludwig going at 6 is somewhat surprising, and I can see that I thought Nez was going to do the full stack of Liv, but that's not the case. He follows that up, so it goes in the second round. It's Rahm, Brooks, Hideki, Justin Thomas. Then it gets to me. So I have like Cantlay, Hatton, Lowry, Hovland, Straka, Neiman is up there. I'm actually going to take Tommy Fleetwood. If we're just going to take a bunch of guys that can't win majors, might as well try to pair him up. He had a very good showing at Portrush last time around in 2019, so hopefully he can follow that up when it's at Portrush again this year. He has a very good Masters track record, and in between, he's been solid at the U.S. Open over the years. So in between my pick in the second round, Tommy Fleetwood after Justin Thomas. I really wish Justin Thomas would have made it to me. It goes Cantlay and then Tyrrell Hatton. So it's back up to me right now. I like Seb Straka a lot. I really like Robert McIntyre, though. As you can see, Robert McIntyre, old Bobby Mac, is in all 4 of the majors right now. And I just like where his game sets up for Augusta National. Lefties always tend to do well at Augusta National. He's only played there twice, and that's before he was at the level he's at right now, and has been very, very good there in both appearances. And I just think that the Linksy style, it's not quite Linksy, it's kind of bomb and gouge, but he too, like Fleetwood, played really well at Portrush when the Open was there last time. So I'm all Euros right now. I'm actually all British Isles. Is it British Isles if you include Ireland? It's Great Britain if you don't include Ireland and only Northern Ireland. Anyway, I got an Irishman. I got a Scot. I have a Northern... No, it is the Great Britain. I have a Northern Irishman, a Brit, and a Scot so far on my team. You can see Shane Lowry was selected directly after Robert McIntyre for me. Nez ends up with the next pick, and he ends up taking Sungjae. Then it goes Hovland. I think that there's a few auto drafters on at the moment. I'm not quite sure. Maybe they have their queue all put up. So the third round goes as follows. Hatton's first, Bobby Mack to me, Lowry, Sungjae, Hovland, Henley. To kick off the fourth round, Connors and Neiman go. It's funny to see Connors go ahead of Neiman, considering Cuss said on our Majors preview show on Monday that Neiman's secretly the best player in the world, so this is great value on him. I was hoping Straka would fall to me. I just got sniped on him, and it really, for me, comes down to the top 3 guys in the ADP right now. Spieth, Akshay, and Cameron Smith. I hope to be able to get one of these 2, because I think that people are fading Spieth a little bit more the closer we get to it, although he's sneakily been good. I'm going to take Akshay with my pick. Again, trying to go with the lefty theme. Him getting his debut out of the way a year ago at Augusta National is really good. Spieth does go with the next pick. Probably going to bet Spieth to win Valero this week. Okay, so here's what happened. Akshay goes, Spieth, and then Tom Kim goes. Tom Kim, when we get to the stats a little bit later on, has his iron game on point. But for me, I think it comes down to Cameron Smith, who I really do like, or Will Zalatoris. We know Zalatoris has had a propensity to do well at hard courses in major championships, and I'm going to end up taking him, which is the first pick that I've made that does not feature a player that is in all 4 majors. When we try to look up Will Zalatoris, we can see Zalatoris is only in the Masters right now. He's only qualified for one of them. So I'm taking a gamble that he is going to do well in the Masters, and that gets him in. The safer pick, I think, is Cam Smith in this spot, but that's just the route that we're going to go down right now. And as we head into the 5th round, Tom Kim, Will Zalatoris, Cam Smith are the first 3 picks of the 5th round. We're starting to get to a point where we're really eliminating a lot of the guys who are still in all 4 of the majors. Let's see, Sam Burns just goes. That leaves, when we scroll back up, to all 4 majors. So Burns is one of the ones. Keegan is still on the board. Cantlay is still on the board. They're in all 4 of the majors. Phil is really the outlier with all of this, just because he's still riding off his PGA Championship win. And this is the last year he's technically qualified for all of the majors, which is somewhat surprising in a lot of ways. It doesn't feel like it's that long ago, and you can see these guys are coming off the board now. So Burns, Clark, Bradley, and Aaron Rye to finish off the 5th round into the 6th. Again, they're in all 4 of the majors. Then you have Theegala, Ben An, and then there's one pick, and then it's going to be my pick. So let's start scrolling down. Theegala came off the board as well, who's in all of the majors. Ben An is in everything besides the PGA Championship at the moment. Ditto for Akshay. Akshay's not in the PGA Championship, but he will be. I'm almost certain of that. So we can take a look at Finau. I think that Finau is still available. Let's see, is Finau still available? No, Finau is not available. He was drafted by Nez. Nez sniping all the guys that I want right now. So we can go with Fitzpatrick. He's in all of them, but I'm going to deviate off the board a little bit because I see that Dietrich is coming up a bit, and I wrote him up in the column about guys that you can take. So with Thomas Dietrich, the biggest thing with him when it comes to the majors only draft is that he's going to be a debutant at Augusta. That never really goes all that well, but he does score a ton, and he's played the major championships really well. He's only in 2. He's in the Masters and PGA, so at least he's in the first 2. That's what I want to have. And he's come top 15 in each of his past 3 major starts. He was T14 at the US Open a year ago, top 10 at the PGA Championship, and even the Open dating back 2 years ago, the third to last one that he played, he was T13. So he's actually shown up pretty well, got him on the clock. They should default to Sergio for me. Wasn't quite paying attention. That's why you build up the queue in case you are doing a show or something happens in the other room that you want to build that up. Sergio is like my favorite end of the board guy. He's playing outside of Neiman. He's been the best player on LIV so far this season. He is determined to make the Ryder Cup team, and obviously he's won the Masters before. He has an exemption into the PGA Championship, so he gets those 2 right off the hop, and I think that he can play pretty well at these style of courses. If his ball striking continues to be as good as it has been, I think he makes a really nice 7th round pick. I mean, I've been talking him up a bunch. I've seen that a lot of people have bet him at the Masters at 150, 175 to 1, whatever he might be. So you see Nez right here took Siwoo Kim. Nez is going to be in for a surprise when he realizes that he's not in any of the majors at the moment. I hope he qualifies because I love Siwoo Kim. Siwoo Kim to make the cut at the Masters is basically my favorite bet every single year. So let's take a look at the guys and scan it right now to see who's left on the board. We got Daniel Berger, who is still on the board right now. I got to see how many majors Berger is in. I don't think it's a lot right now. He is not qualified for any. However, I believe in the official World Golf Rankings, he is inside of the top 50, which would get him into the Masters. This is where you have to start rolling the dice a little bit on some of your players. Let's see. Berger is at 41. So after this week, he's not going to fall outside the top 50. He's going to end up in those events. But he's still being drafted that way as well. I'm actually going to go with Davis Thompson in this spot. We take a peek at Davis Thompson and see where he's at for the majors. He's in 3 of them. He's in the Masters, PGA, and US Open. He's in everything besides the Open, so you're going to get plenty of starts from him if you advance, and hopefully he can play well enough in those situations to get in. Now you see Justin Rose is in 3. He's still on the board. It's my pick right now. I still have Nikolai Højgaard in my queue because he is qualified for the first 2 as well. We'll scroll back to the top. Minwoo is interesting because Minwoo has played really well in major championships. I'm going to go with Minwoo. And if he ends up winning in Houston this weekend, which is probably unlikely considering that Scotty's at the very top of the leaderboard, and I bet Minwoo to win, that almost assuredly means he is not going to win. Fingers crossed, I've reverse jinxed myself at this point. But if he just does well in the Masters, which I'm almost certain he's qualified for, I probably should have had this up. Yeah, Minwoo is in the Masters. It's the only one that he's in at the moment. Same as Denny McCarthy. It's the only one that he's in. But Minwoo right now is at, where is he at in the world rankings? He's at number 55. He's currently, as I record this, in 2nd place at Houston. I would guess that if he continues to play well, like he'll jump inside the top 50, even though he already has his Masters invitation, that if he can continue to populate the top 50, which would mean that he would have to play, somewhat well at the Masters. He would have to do reasonably well at something else. And, in the elevated events where there's no cuts, there's a way that you can do that. I'm probably going to take Phil with my next pick. My next pick is my last pick, so I can try to differentiate my team somewhere. That probably means either taking Nikolai or Phil because they'll basically go undrafted. You can see their ADP 57, 58. They're not going in every single draft, which is kind of huge if you can get something out of them. Phil put in a decent performance. I probably have a bit more faith that Nikolai could just pop up and do well at majors. And that's, that's the route I'm going to go. This is the first team I've drafted in the 50. I'm going to stick to the 3 guys that I like the most. Phil, you do automatically get all 4 of those starts. Now, the starts don't mean anything if you don't qualify past the Masters. So that's, you need Phil to... Phil, if there's one place where you would think that Phil would do well, it would be at Augusta National, especially with a bit of form coming in. But other than that, Nicolai probably has a better chance at the other majors right now, assuming he ends up getting in to the U.S. Open and into the Open Championship. So you can just see, going down the list, I don't know who quite went undrafted in this. Like Bezadenhout, I don't think went. Bezadenhout is in 3 of the drafts. Let's see here. Bez did he go? Yes, he was drafted in this draft. Hollywood Hoagie. Hoagie might be good for Valero too, coming off a very nice tournament where he almost won the Players. Tom Hoagie was drafted as well. So you can see that people are just using these lists and piling up as many players as possible to maximize their starts. Pavon and Justin Rose would be the other 2. I wasn't sure if they went or not. I'm guessing that Rose went. Yeah, Rose went. Did Pavon go? Pavon did not go, despite being in 3 of the majors. So he is in the Masters, the U.S. Open, and the Open Championship right now. So he's not currently in the PGA, and frankly, if he doesn't start playing a little bit better, I don't think that he's going to get himself in, although he is currently number 49th in the world. It would only take one pretty good finish, either at Augusta, at Heritage, or at what was formerly known as the Wells Fargo, the Truist, before the PGA Championship, in order to get himself in. Like, he has one top 10, maybe even one top 15. That should be enough points to sneak himself into those final ones. So let's take a look at the draft grid right now. As you can see on the screen, I had the second pick in this draft. So my team ended up Rory, Fleetwood, Bobby Mack, Akshay, Zalatoris. Again, Zalatoris is only in the Masters. That one's very risky. And Akshay is not in all 4 of them either. He's not in the PGA Championship. As of right now, I would expect him to qualify. Dietrich's only in 2. Sergio's only in 2. I believe when we looked it up, Davis Thompson's in 3 of them. Everything besides the Open, Davis Thompson is in. So if he plays well enough, I would need him to play well enough to get my teams to advance to the Open, which should mean that he ends up in the Open as it is. Then you have Minwoo and Højgaard. So Minwoo's only in 1, Højgaard's only in 2. But all of the players that I have drafted are currently in the Masters. They can use those Masters points. Again, my team needs to do well to advance. If these guys play well at the Masters, almost assuredly they would get themselves into the PGA Championship, so on and so forth. So that's the strategy that I'm taking right now. You can see some of the final round picks here. I'm just going to go from rounds 8 on in order of how everything went. So it went Bezadenhout, Harman, Cam Young, Harris English. I took Davis Thompson. Then at the turn, Justin Rose and Tom Hoagie. I take Minwoo. I probably would have taken Hoagie over Minwoo if that wasn't the order that everything went down. Poston, Rasmus Højgaard. And Rasmus Højgaard is in 2 majors at the same time, but let's take a look at which 2 those are. Rasmus is in the Masters and the Open right now. So he's not in the U.S. Open. He's not in the PGA Championship. So that's why I actually prefer Nicolai in this spot. Even if you think that Rasmus is better, at least I know I get the first 2 majors out of Nicolai in this contest. After that, it's Dustin Johnson, Nick Taylor, Chris Kirk, Nick Dunlap, Max Homa, Steven Jaeger. Then I take Nicolai Højgaard. I have no idea who ended up going last because it did not populate on my screen, but it really doesn't matter at that same time. You can use code Mayo right now and get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. Then you can hit up the lobby and play in some of these best ball contests. Plus, you get a free pick in the Pick'em game that you can just use at any time when you want to get in on some of that action. Whether you play in a Pick'em state or a champion state for Underdog, both will apply for your free pick status. So I would encourage you to put that to good use when you use code Mayo at Underdog right now. Have you noticed how Pat Mayo seems a whole lot better rested recently? It's no secret. I got my old mattress, took it outside, threw it in the trash the moment my Helix mattress showed up. My wife and I took the quiz on helixsleep.com. We went through everything and we decided the firmness. We wanted the temperature, how we actually sleep. And all of a sudden, the mattress shows up, we lay down, and I'm not having a lot of the sleep problems that I've been having in the past. I just wake up 50 times a night. Not no more with my Helix mattress. I was sleeping on my side with my head underneath my pillow, and I was getting chicken wing for when I woke up, and my back and my shoulders were sore because there was a divot inside my old mattress where I've been sleeping on it so long. Now, all of that has gone. It's been such an upgrade with my Helix mattress that I'm getting full sleep, and even my Apple Watch is telling me that I'm getting a far more full sleep this time. I'm not hitting 54% on my sleep cycle anymore. Now I'm up at like 90%, even 100% some nights. So hopefully this can help you out as well. And you can go to helixsleep.com/PatMayo for the March Madness sale, which is 20% off site-wide. That's helixsleep.com/PatMayo for 20% off site-wide. helixsleep.com/PatMayo. Okay, time to dig more into the field at Valero. It's 156 players. It's going to be a full field. You'll want to wait for the weather and WDs before firing away on Monday because certain players are going to get themselves qualified for the Masters once again after the Houston Open. I'll update that sheet that I have down in the description with the players in the majors on Monday afternoon as well if you really want to get in to those underdog drafts. The model that I've built out for Valero, you got off the tee, 6%. I'm going to jack that up a little bit to 8%. Approach 14, ball striking, so the combination of the both 7. I'm really overweighting those. Par 5s 8%. Good drives gained is 11%. That's going to be my de facto greens and regulation stat, but combine it with driving a little bit. Proximity 150 to 175. I also have proximity 100 to 150 weighted in this as well, just because I do think that wedge play, when you think about the players that have done here over the years so well, it's a lot of really good wedge players. 3 of the 4 par 3s are over 200 yards, so we'll go 200 to 225. Par 5 opportunities gain 10%, around the green 10%, and then putting 10 to 15 feet at 10% as well. We'll see who that spits us out over the past 24 rounds. FantasyNational.com/Mayo to get yourself 20% off and go through this as much as you like. Daniel Berger actually rates out number 1. We'll take a look into him. Bud Colley, we'll take a look into him. Then it's Tommy, Michael Kim, Tom Kim, Joel Damon, Rico Hoey, Jacob Bridgman, Lee Hodges, Ludwig Oberg. That is the top 10. In 2, Connors, Cantlay, Hideki, Siwoo, McGreevy, Ricky Castillo, Stephen Fisk, who I assume is, number 1 in good drives. That makes sense. Akshay, Seamus Power, Andrew Putnam, Ben Martin, Kurt Kitayama. Then you got Keegan. I could see Keegan really challenging this week. And he would be a part of that like mid-tier Corey Connors range. At least I think that's where they're going to fall within the odds. Corey Connors' odds are going to be probably slightly unfair considering he comes in great form and has won this tournament twice. Hopefully some of the names at the top of the board push him down to that like 25-28 range, although that is likely wishful thinking when we get to the odds board when it gets released on Monday morning. Here is what Daniel Berger has been doing over the last little bit. He has 5 consecutive starts with finishes inside the top 25. He was gaining off the tee a ton except for at the Players. He actually made a pretty decent run at the Players, and I believe it was Sunday that got away from him. The putting's been great, the chipping has been great, and the approach has either been neutral or well above average. He had the one bad driving range. Everything is kind of setting up for Berger to do well here. Issue is he's never played Valero all that well. However, it has been a long time. He has not played this since 2019, and then before that it was 2015, so that was 10 years ago. Not much we can really take from that, although he has won in Texas. He won that first start out of COVID over Morikawa in Xander at Colonial, if you do recall. So it's not like he's been abysmal at Texas courses over the years. So I think that if you can catch Berger in the 40s, that's probably a pretty good bet right off the hop, considering if we find out that there's no huge weather problems. And then you got Bud Colley. So Bud Colley has been on a heater. Obviously, he played great at the Players. He played great at Valspar, made that run, and it was all due to his approach. It was all due to his putting at the Players Championship. He's starting to put it all together. This is a tournament where I bet him to win last year, and that didn't really work out all that well. He ended up coming 39th. He just could not hit his approaches all that well. However, it's... he's a guy that I'd probably want to go to here. He has a top 10, albeit a very long time ago. You can see he used to have great approach play at this course. I'm always in love with his short game. That draw he's hitting off the tee looks pretty good at the moment. So it depends, again, where he comes in. I think that he was 75-1 in the bad wave, the perceived bad wave at the Valspar, and he was still 75-1. I think he probably comes in lower than that. This field at the top isn't quite equivalent to what we saw at Valspar, but it's pretty similar if you consider Ludwig on the same tier as Justin Thomas. And, Fleetwood was the favorite that week. Then it was Justin Thomas. Xander was pushed down because we didn't know how he was going to play. Now, obviously, he led the field in approach that week, did not win, and Victor was way down the leaderboard as well. So maybe the Valspar did have a better field overall, especially at the top end, but I could see Collie coming in a little bit lower this time around, maybe around 100, 125, because it's not the week after he just came sixth at the Players. Although he had a better finish at Valspar, that was now 2 weeks ago, and everyone has forgotten about that. So the recency bias is off a little bit, but he does rank second in the modeling. It's very encouraging to see. Then you have Tom Kim. Tom Kim, sneakily, is just been one of the best iron players in the world here for like 2 months. 3.6 at Valspar, 9.9 at the Players, above at the Arnold Palmer when he still missed the cut. And you'd want him at longer courses, although I don't consider this to be the longest course. Par 72, 7,400 yards. It's shorter than Houston was this week when you adjust for par. Probably shorter than Valspar as well when you adjust for par. But you always like him a little bit more at courses where you can dial in your wedges, take dead aims at greens. That's what you can do here. The issue with him is just all putting right now. It has not been good at all. His best, he had this sneaky run Pebble and then to Phoenix, and then he's averaging almost 3 strokes lost per event over his past 5. That ain't good. However, the iron play is good enough to maybe you can catch him coming out of it. That would be the tactic behind him. He played this last year. He missed the cut, lost in everywhere tee to green, but did gain putting. I did want to take a look back at last year's tournament. I mentioned this a little bit earlier. So if you dig into Fantasy National and you go into proximity gained, you can take a look at each of the buckets where the players actually did well from. So it was this 150 to 175 bucket. Now, Akshay gained across the board everywhere. But when you sort that way and see who did very well, Putnam was the worst in the field and still came inside the top 15. Ditto for S.H. Kim. But when you switch it back over, you see there's Denny. He was 4th. He came in 2nd. Todd was 7th, he came in 5th. Rory was 8th, he came in 3rd. Thorbjorn Olsen, Chan Kim, and Keith Mitchell are all top 10. They all came inside the top 15 of this tournament. Mac Meisner, ended up coming in 10th a year ago as well. And you can see Akshay is not too far down that list. He was top 20 from that bucket a year ago coming in. So that was one that I really wanted to take a harder look at because when I started clicking through, and maybe it's a 1-year sample. This stuff tends to change year over year. Proximity from 200 plus did feature Akshay and Denny. They were both up there inside the top 10. But other than that, you see very few players who ended up inside the top 10. Matt Fitzpatrick is the only other one, and he was T13 in that category of all players. The 175 to 200 range, you don't see a lot of names near the very top of the leaderboard. The shorter we go down, weirdly enough, you start seeing more and more pop up. There's Akshay and Shank from 125 to 150, 100 to 125. Akshay is up there, so is Rico, so is Sam Stevens. There's Henley and Spieth, who both came inside the top 10. Tyson Alexander up there as well. So the wedge play continues to be so important. You see the 75 to 100 range. Hideki came in 7th, Akshay in 1st, Jordan Spieth in 10th, Henley, Rory, they're all up there. So that's where they were able to generate a lot of their birdie opportunities from when they were not able to take dead aim. I mean, that's even when they take dead aim at some of the par 5s and going for it in 2. Just inherently, you end up a little bit farther out than you want to, then you really need to stick it close. It's shocking that Rory was so good from that wedge range and did not have he came 3rd, but he was still 9 shots off the lead. A great finish for Rory, and I believe it was his first top 10 of the year to that point coming in, and he was not having the year that he's currently having right now 12 months ago. But I just thought that was very interesting. That's why I've included so many of these wedge ranges in, and we'll try to see who the best players are from those wedge ranges combined. So, from 125 to 150, Seamus Power is the best, but he's near dead last from 100 to 125 and near dead last in 150 to 175. So that kind of takes him off the board a little bit. Connors and Tom Kim and Lee Hodges all do exceptional from those ranges. Tom Kim is 2nd from 125 to 150 and 1st from 150 to 175. 36th from 100 to 125. So his iron game stacks up exactly how you want it to go for this tournament. Matteo Manticero is actually quite good from this range as well if you're looking for a long shot. Obviously, Hoagie is exceptional from all of these ranges. Another reason to give him a good look. We saw Ben Martin pop up a year ago. Why? Because he's great with his wedges. Other players who rate out really well coming in top 50 in both. Putnam, who was up there again last year, Kitayama, the Gim Reaper, Kazire, Mr. Punt his putter himself. Joel Damon is high up there, Francesco Molinari, Adam Svensson, who actually turned it around. He switched to a broomstick putter at the Valspar, and I believe he missed the cut at the Valspar, but he was playing a little bit better at the Houston Open, you can see that his approach play was very good, and he was just trying to get his sea legs underneath of him with the broomstick putter at this point. He is playing the weekend, although he's already 2 over through 2 holes in his Saturday round at the Houston Texas Open. But the putting has not been abysmal for him. He's 42nd of all players who made the cut at this point in time. Maybe he puts himself out of it, but he needed to make a change. His putting has been so bad. And the iron play has not been bad. The driving is not horrible. The chipping is up and down, like whatever. But when your putter is consistently that bad, we've seen a lot of guys make the change to the broomstick and solve a lot of problems. Maybe in week 2 for him, that can come through a little bit more because his wedge play and his 150 to 175 is exactly where really you want it to be at the moment. Other guys who rate out well, Ari O is up there. Ricky Fowler does pretty well. This is Fowler's only shot at getting into the Masters, is winning this tournament. So maybe this is a spot where Ricky can pop back up. We'll see. Michael Kim does pretty well, although I do expect if Michael Kim gets into the Masters that he WDs from this tournament. But just keep that in mind as we go forward. Other players, Max McGreevy is the best player from one. It's so funny that he could be the best player from 100 to 125 and then one of the worst from 125 to 150. His long approach play is not great either. Rico Hoey pops up in 2 of the key ranges that we're looking at. 10th in short range and then 5th from 150 to 175. First off the tee of all players. First in ball striking of all players. 8th in good drives gain. I think that is the most important thing that I'm looking for this week, is you'll start to see you get a lot of players who have won this tournament before that are just up there in good drives. I mean, it's Stephen Fisk is number 1, so we'll probably go back to him. He missed the cut on the number when the cut moved to -3 in Houston. He was stuck at -2. Couldn't really get it going, but great on par 5s, great off the tee, and in good drives does very well. So it's Fisk, Tommy, Ben Griffin, Daniel Berger, Ben Martin, Bryce Garnett, Takumi Kanaya, Rico Hoey is 8th, Putnam is 9th. So you saw Putnam's basically good at everything in this tournament besides long par 3s and putting. And that's kind of what it shook itself out to. I mean, he's not bad at putting. He doesn't stick the ball as close as you want, does not beat up on the par 5s like you would like, because off the tee is more accuracy based than anything, but the approach play has been good. Rico, and probably wouldn't hate going to Rico, but you then have Taylor Moore, who had to WD from Houston. He was in 20% of my lineup, so those were dead immediately. That's always fun when you withdraw 4 minutes before lock, and I'm taking my kids to school, don't have a moment to change that up, but he is up there if he ends. He's currently in the field. We'll see how he's doing. He might WD again, who knows, but this is his only chance to get into the Masters. He's 10th in good drives gain. McGreevy, Akshay, Vic Perez, Carson Young, John Pack, who I believe got a win in Argentina and got himself into the Open Championship earlier on this year on the Korn Ferry Tour. Finau, Connors, Rose, Hisatune. I believe I saw, was Spieth up there as well? Where's Spieth? Spieth is 16th in good drives. So just, there's 3 guys who've won this tournament before who are still up there in good drives game. Tom Kim is 22nd. Ryan Gerard and Ricky Castillo, Doug Gim, Michael Kim, they're all there. So these were the type of players that I'm going to be going at this week. Like, you don't see Hideki up there. Not to say that Hideki can't win. He's a class player in this field. Ditto for Ludwig. And they generally only play harder courses by and large. So maybe that's weighting them down a little bit. But if they're not going to be hitting a ton of greens in regulation, just probably not going to go that route for them. And these are more of the players that I'm going to target. Daniel Berger almost seems like an auto bet at this point with the way that he's playing, the stats that line up almost perfectly. You'd like him to be better from 150 to 175, but maybe he just doesn't hit very many shots from that range, and he can roll a hot putter. He rates out first in the model, and the good drives continue to be up there along with his top-end wedge play. Again, if he's in the 40s, if they open him at 28, I'm not going to bet him, and then he's probably going to win is what would happen with Daniel Berger, but he just continues to pop up. We're starting to see that form. And it's a lot like Akshay a year ago. If you think that Berger is still an ascendant player, we're now a year removed from his return from that back injury that cost him the 18 months. That maybe now he is actually starting to hit that peak form. This is a guy that is President's Cup, Ryder Cup type level of player, and we'll see if he can get back to that form as long as we get some good odds to go along with it. I'm good with that. Okay, it's time to guess the odds for Valero. I'm going to be announcing a new sportsbook sponsor on Monday's show, so please tune into that. They're also the ones funding the giveaway for that big experience in Toronto that I'm talking about, so we're going to show some love to them when the time is right, probably on Monday. But here's what I'm guessing is going to happen at the very top of the board. I got 4 right now. I think Ludwig is the favorite at 12-1. Tommy and Hideki just after him at 16-1. And Cantlay coming in following his TGL championship victory at 18-1. I think those are going to be the big four. And then slightly behind them in the 20s, we'll get Connors and Keegan at 22, Akshay and Spieth at 25, and then Tony Finau at 25 or 28. Then you get into your 30s, Tom Kim, Matt McNeely, Sam Burns, Daniel Berger, and Denny McCarthy. There's a few other guys that could penetrate up into that level, depending on what the WDs are, the results in Houston, if guys are trying to carry that forward. For example, if Michael Kim ends up with a good showing and decides to play, he'll probably be 40-1 as well, just based on where he's been popping up in tournaments recently. But I think that's the odds board. If that was the odds board that I was looking at right now, I'd probably bet Akshay and Spieth, and then Berger, and that would probably be my week until I started going down the list to find the Bud Collies of the world and the other players that I identified when I went through the stat modeling. And I'm sure we'll pick up some more guys when I talk with Jeff on Monday. That will do it for me on the Valero Texas Open research and preview. Obviously, Monday, we got the full show coming for the picks and bets live on Wednesday with Tambo. And then Masters Week starts on Thursday with the player-by-player preview. If you want to go back and check out our early bets for both the Masters and all of the other major championships, we released that show on Monday with me, Cust, and Jeff. I thought it was one of the best shows of the year. It was a lot of fun, and we gave you some long shots to consider that are still there in the open market for all of the majors, especially the Masters right now. I believe it was Akshay, who I think got kind of killed when he did well at the Players, but Bobby Mack and Sergio are two that are still at triple digits that you can find right now, depending on where you look. All right, smash a like, sub to the channel, leave me your winner in the comment section. I shall see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!